So I'm going to talk about container metaphors and how they're central to so many different ways that we conceptualize things. Beginning with meaning, with language. We imagine language as a container. What does it contain? It contains meaning. So I put my meaning into my words, and I am sending my meaning out through this technological channel, and then you are receiving the meaning, you are unpacking it, you are taking it out of its container, and hopefully understanding it. It's what's called the conduit metaphor. George Lakoff and Mark Johnson articulated in the book's Metaphor We Live By in 1980. So language is a container. What else is a container? The self, right? We think of the self as a container. But it's much... Boy, we really elaborate this one. So what are the parts of a container, right? Because this is what we're talking about. We've got the outside surface layer that's protective. And then we have the interior, which we can't see. How do we talk about the exterior? One, which is I'll probably make this point 6 different times. We think of the exterior as telling us something about what's going on inside. Again, it's a protective layer. It has a permeability, right? So some things are hard and thick and don't let anything in, and some things are thin and sensitive and let things in. Such as, we talk about people that have thick skin, people that have thin skin, people that put on armor that's protective. We also think of the outer layer as shallow, right? The surface, or like, this is such a surface interpretation of what just happened, or what a shallow reading, right? You haven't penetrated to the interior, which what we think of as where the core of meaning lies. Something deeper. That's my cat. Yes. What? We go through this every night. He can't come in. It's just, you don't want to. I know. It looks like you do. Oh boy. So, right, the shallow surface layer. And then we go deeper, right? We break through the exterior and delve inward. We dig down until we find what's hidden inside. And what's hidden inside? Another container, right? The heart container. So essentially one of our deepest concepts is that we're a container that has a container. What does the heart contain? The heart contains love, feeling, our ability to connect intimately with other people. Right, in this container, that doesn't have a tab. It's got a little door. And we can open it up and let people in, or we can close it and not let people in. Right? Or just like the exterior, we can harden our heart. Same thing, right? Containers. So the outside is reflective of the inside. That's not always true, right? But we kind of want it to be. Makes us mad when it's not. Like, this better be Pacifico Clara Cerveza. That's what the outside tells me, you know? But maybe they put some other kind of beer in here. Beer kind of all tastes the same to me. They could have easily... Hey, I'm in the middle of a lecture. Get out of here. Yeah, come here. Come on. I can't hang out with you right now. The outside's reflective of the inside. Here's an anecdote. Talked to two women, this was a while ago, that had really long hair, like hair all the way down. And they cut it one day. They just showed up, you know, they go to work, go out with their friends, and everybody is like, oh my God, what happened? Tell me what happened. And what they want to hear is, well, I finally broke up with my boyfriend. Or, you know, I was sitting up late one night and I realized that something in my life wasn't right, and I quit my job, or my mother died. We want to hear something like that. But they didn't have, neither one of them had that story. They did it for fairly utilitarian reasons. They were just kind of sick of having to deal with long hair, getting in their food, getting caught in things, like closing the car door on it, I remember was one of them. And so there was just like one final straw, and they just decided to cut it all off. But what we want is for dramatic changes on the exterior to reflect some kind of dramatic change on the interior. And when they would tell people, you better not jump. Don't jump. Are you going to jump in the tub? So when they would tell people this, they wouldn't be satisfied with this answer. You know, they wanted some kind of drama. They wanted some kind of internal change to be reflective of this dramatic external. And even I kind of wanted that. Like, I listened to them, and I even caught myself being like, are they really telling the truth? Maybe they just don't realize some big significant event has happened in their life. I talked about this earlier in a previous lecture, but in novels, when writers used to describe bad guys were always ugly. Good guys were always beautiful. Same thing, right? And you can almost imagine Like if you knew nothing about human biology, it almost seems like a plausible idea to think that when people have ugly internal lives, that somehow manifests outwardly and like twists their features and turns them outwardly ugly. And we do have a bias towards beautiful people. Another container idea is that here's a classic movie scene. Something terrible happens to someone. It's usually a woman. And she goes home and gets in the shower and takes this cathartic, hot shower scene. So what's the idea here? The idea is not that she's just washing the dirt off of her body, right? The implied meaning is that simultaneously she's washing some kind of meaning off of her. That terrible song, I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair, pretty much exemplifies that idea. What's interesting about this to me is that you don't have to think about this in language, right? This is a metaphor that exists outside of language. Like you can have that experience. You can go home, you can take that cathartic shower and feel as if you're washing something off of you that is not physical. You can participate in that metaphor, and it's not linguistic. It's really not visual. And this points to the multimodal nature of metaphor. Man, you are something else. What? What do you want, a beer? What do you want? Come in the tub. Come on. Get on up here. Is this better? So what it points to is the multimodal nature of metaphor. What does that mean? It just means there's multiple modes. The metaphor is not just this linguistic structure. It would be cool if it was just that. If it was just a conceptual system that we used to talk to one another, that would be pretty amazing. I was blown away just learning that. That we take bodily experiences that we have and then use them to describe more complex abstract realities. That's interesting enough. But it goes beyond that because we have visual metaphors. If you look in any magazine, if you watch television, look at newspapers and their opinion section, there's always some kind of visual metaphor. Exists outside of language. Gestures, things we do with the physical body. We often gesture metaphorically when we're speaking. Exists outside of language. But this one is particularly interesting because it's almost like an experiential metaphor. You experience it with your entire body. You act it out. And that's really the only way you can understand it. So,
I'll probably get back to that.
One other thing about containers. So we think about ourselves as containers. But being human beings, we realize that what we present, the outside of the container, is signaling, right? It's communicating quite a lot to the people around us. Some of them don't seem to care. But most people do. And so, what do? We don't walk around naked. We put on an outfit, a costume, right? We manipulate the exterior because that's what people interact with. Again, it's the mystery, it's the black box of the interior subjective reality that is what's so intriguing about the container metaphor. Because all we can do, I mean, sure, you can put an intense amount of effort into working on whatever's going on inside. But the problem is nobody can actually see that. And it's very easy to fake sometimes, right? Like think about meditation. It's like you could have 100 people sitting in a room closing their eyes. How do you know if somebody is just sitting there going through their grocery list, thinking about the last breakup they had, or if they're actually focusing their attention on a single point and trying to understand their relationship as a viewer and experiencer of their subjective reality. Who knows? And so what's much easier is to just do this. Put one of these on. And so this is where, at least in part, the acting metaphor comes into being, right? Shakespeare, most famously. You know, life is a stage, blah, blah, blah. Everybody knows that line. But there's actually like this much after that, where he just goes down point by point and elaborates on exactly what that metaphor means to him, which is that you go through these stages of life, and that different stages of life give you the opportunity to try on different behaviors, right? So being young, it's much easier to be wild and carefree and rebellious because that's kind of what everybody expects. Whereas once you're an old man or woman and you've got gray hair and you've got wrinkles and you know, you look like somebody who might have learned something. You just look like that. Maybe you didn't learn anything, but you then have the opportunity to sit around and find any young person that you can grab a hold of and impart some wisdom that you've learned or haven't learned. And that the acting is then just kind of going along with these points of life and the opportunities that they give us to explore. All right, and then another part of the acting metaphor is putting on masks, right? It's covering things up. I got this face, I can put on the mask, it hides my face. You can put on multiple masks. You can become other people temporarily with them. And there's also a falsity to this whole conception, that there's essentially like a trickery involved in the theater. I mean, there was a reason that they didn't bury actors with everybody else, right? The idea was like, these people are lying. They're lying to you in a way that we kind of like. But there's some kind of falseness to that's implied in all of these metaphorical frames that have to do with acting, everything being a stage, a play, things like that. And so I always like pointing out differences between our physical reality and the metaphorical reality that we construct from it. So here's one big difference. I'm this naked body. This is the base layer. This is it. I can't strip off anything else. I mean, I could shave my head. I don't know. But there is a base layer that you're dealing with. I can put a mask on, and then I can take it off, and there's nothing left to take off. Right? I can dress myself in a costume, present myself in any sort of way, but strip it off, and then you see the naked truth underneath it. What's real? There's a base layer to all of this. It's not clear that that's the case when we talk about this metaphorically. When people talk about performing roles, what's sometimes implied is that there's masks all the way down. There's costumes all the way down. There's no base layer. You just keep stripping stuff off, and there's no end to it. You deceive yourself when you think you've gotten to bedrock, when you've gotten to the end of it. What you've actually done is just gotten to the point where you can no longer perceive the mask and the costume. At different times in my life, I've believed that's true. But that's like the reductionary version. That's like thinking that if you associate nakedness with truth, you have to strip everything off. You have to go down till there's nothing left, right? Which is interesting, because it's like, it would be like doing this, right? Oh, fuck, it's not gonna come off. But there's still this other layer. And so again, it's this like black box of subjective, like, what the hell is inside of this that you can't ever get at, and that you prioritize what's in here as opposed to what's out here as the real essence of who you are. But here's another way to think about it. Is none of these are wrong. They just, every metaphor is partially wrong, right? Every metaphor shows you something that's true that we describe about our experience, and then it hides other parts. So here's another way, right? You can think of the self as like where you're building something, right? If you're born, you have nothing, and you construct this thing as you go along, and maybe you get better at building. And if you build yourself up into this interesting thing, then it doesn't make sense to think that by deconstructing or stripping all of that away, you're going to get at some basic truth. Because if you just strip all that away, you essentially strip it down to nothing. Right? There's literally nothing there. Which again, it highlights other facets of how we talk about ourselves and our identity, who we can become. And both of those are important, right? And these are just like two conceptions. There's so many of these. So, this is the lecture that I'm going to give tomorrow at Stray Cat Film Center. I'm going to show this movie, The Singing Ringing Tree. The Singing Ringing Tree is a German children's movie based off a Brothers Grimm tale made in 1957. It's beautiful. Beautiful movie. It can be appreciated by all ages. And in this movie, you have a princess who's really a spoiled brat. It's great character. She is. You really hate her. She's just such a spoiled little brat in this movie. And this prince shows up, and he wants to marry her because she's a princess, and she's very beautiful. And he gives her this box of pearls, and she rejects him. And then he leaves, meets this magic person that ends up turning him into a bear. So that's a strange thing that happened. A guy tries to marry a woman, she rejects him, and he turns into a bear. She feels bad about this. And so she goes off to try to find him, I guess. And she makes this bet with this magic bean. And she thinks of herself as she's a beautiful person on the outside. And so she makes a bet with him that, oh, well, my interior is going to reflect my exterior. I am beautiful on the inside, thus I am beautiful on the outside. And he's like, I don't think so. I think you're a spoiled brat. And so they make the bet that her interior is going to reflect her exterior, and she turns into a ugly witch, I guess. So you have both characters who at the beginning are kind of these idealistic, beautiful people. And then they actually have to live together in this weird magical world with this little elf man who's only trying to fuck them up. And it turns out they're these two really ugly people. A bear and kind of an ugly witch. And it's the realization of what they actually are, and then the acceptance of it, that they again become beautiful. So this is essentially a metaphor for the beginnings of relationships, right? In the beginnings of relationships, we misperceive who this person actually is. We have all of these idealistic notions. And then when you start living with someone, you start to see all that fade away. You actually get to know who they are, and you realize they're not what you thought. And then you either run or accept it and actually have a relationship with someone. So, if you haven't seen this movie, which you probably haven't, I think it's streaming on YouTube for free. You should watch it. And just think about all the different ways in this film how the exterior reflects the interior and how they use it. They do it in some surprising ways. Like, you think, well, the man turns into a bear, so he must be threatening and gruff, but he's really not. He's like this sensitive, sad bear that has just kind of given up, but still kind of is industrious. I don't know. It's a very interesting take. So check it out. And come to Stray Cat if you're in Kansas City. I do a lecture series, Metaphors in Cinema, at least once a month. I guess that's all I have to say about containers.